The desert was quiet that evening, stretching endlessly under a sky painted in shades of orange, pink, and deep purple. The wind whispered softly across the sand and rocks, carrying with it the faint smell of sage and dry earth. Among the dunes and sparse vegetation, a small settlement of adobe homes sat quietly, almost as if it were part of the land itself. It was a place where the past and present met, where the echoes of history lingered in every corner, and where people lived their lives quietly, shaped by tradition, resilience, and the harshness of the environment. In one of these small homes lived an Apache woman. She had grown up in this land, running barefoot over the dry ground, climbing rocky hills, and watching the sun rise and set with a regularity that felt sacred. From a young age, she had learned that life was hard and that people must be strong to survive. She had seen many things that no child should ever have to see: families torn apart, neighbors forced to leave, and the slow fading of old customs. But despite the hardships, she had developed a strong heart and a quiet spirit. She learned to rely on herself, to face challenges without complaint, and to keep her emotions closely guarded. Even though she appeared strong on the outside, there was a part of her that carried a deep sadness. It was a feeling she rarely spoke about, a weight that pressed on her chest during long, quiet nights. It was not a sadness caused by one event or one loss. It was something that had grown slowly over time, layered with experiences of loneliness, unspoken fears, and moments when she felt invisible in a world that often seemed indifferent. She had friends and family around her, yes, but there were parts of her heart that had never been touched, never been held, never known the gentle affection that so many others took for granted. She had noticed it when she saw other young women with their partners, holding hands, laughing, sharing small touches that spoke of care and love. She had watched couples in the town square, sharing smiles and quiet glances, and she had felt an emptiness inside her that she could not name. It was not jealousy in the ordinary sense, nor was it bitterness. It was simply the awareness that she had never experienced something so simple and human, something that others seemed to have so easily. For years, she kept these feelings to herself. She had learned early on that vulnerability could be dangerous, especially in a world where survival often required toughness. She had learned to hide her tears, to speak softly so as not to draw unwanted attention, and to keep her desires private. Yet, inside, the longing remained. It was a quiet, persistent ache that sometimes became almost tangible, like a shadow that followed her even in the brightest sunlight. Her routine was simple, shaped by necessity and habit. She woke early, tending to the small garden behind her home, watering the sparse plants, and checking the few animals she kept. She gathered firewood and prepared meals for herself and her family. And she worked with skill and care, never complaining even when the work was exhausting. She knew the value of these simple tasks, how they connected her to the land and to the community, and she found a strange comfort in the rhythm of daily life. Even with all the work, there were moments of quiet reflection. She would sometimes sit on the edge of the hill near her home, looking out over the desert as the sun moved slowly across the sky. In those moments, she allowed herself to think about the life she had lived and the life she wished she could have. She thought about her childhood, the lessons her parents had taught her, and the dreams she had quietly held on to, even when she had no one to share them with. She thought about love, not the stories told in books or songs, but real love, the kind that made people feel safe, understood, and truly seen. It was during one of these quiet evenings that the cowboy arrived in town. He was a stranger, riding a horse that looked strong and healthy, and he carried himself with a calm confidence that came from years of experience on the open range. He was not flashy or loud. He spoke when necessary, listened carefully, and observed the world with a steady gaze. The people of the town had seen many travelers come and go, some kind, some not. But there was something about him that made him stand apart. Perhaps it was the way he respected the land, or the way he treated animals and people with care. The Apache woman noticed him too. Though she did not immediately speak to him, she watched as he helped repair fences, guided horses, and carried supplies for those in need. There was no boastfulness in his actions, no attempt to impress anyone. He simply did what was needed, quietly and efficiently. Over time, she found herself drawn to his presence, though she could not explain why. It was not romantic, at least not at first. It was a curiosity, a recognition of a kindred spirit, someone who moved through the world with a sense of purpose and respect. One evening, after a long day of work, the two found themselves alone near a small fire outside the woman's home. The sun had just set, leaving the sky painted in deep oranges and purples, and the desert air had cooled to a comfortable chill. The woman sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, while the cowboy tended to the fire, adding small pieces of wood to keep it burning. There was a silence between them, but it was not awkward. It was a silence that carried weight, a space where unspoken thoughts and emotions could exist without judgment. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but steady. "No one ever kissed me," she said. It was not a question, not a plea, but a simple statement of fact. The words hung in the air, fragile yet powerful, like a glass sculpture waiting to be touched. She did not look at him directly, instead staring into the fire, watching the flames dance and shift. The cowboy paused, surprised not by the words themselves, but by the honesty behind them. He could hear the weight of years in her voice, the quiet ache of loneliness, and the courage it took to speak such a thing aloud. He had encountered many people in his travels, some who shared their lives freely, others who hid their hearts behind walls, but rarely had he heard such a vulnerable truth spoken with such calm strength. He did not respond immediately, not because he was unsure, but because he understood that some moments required stillness, reflection, and respect. Instead, he simply listened, allowing the words to settle between them, letting the fire crackle and the desert wind carry away the tension. In that quiet space, something shifted. There was no need for action, no need for words beyond acknowledgement. The fact that she had spoken at all was enough to create a connection, however fragile, however fleeting. As the night deepened, they continued to sit by the fire, each lost in their own thoughts, but aware of the presence of the other. The woman felt a strange sense of relief, as if a small burden had been lifted simply by sharing her truth. She realized that she had not needed a solution, a response, or even comfort. She had only needed to be heard, to be seen. And in that moment, she had been. The cowboy, for his part, felt a mixture of respect, empathy, and quiet admiration. He recognized the courage it took to speak so openly, the strength required to reveal a part of oneself that had been hidden for so long. He did not offer false words or shallow consolation. He simply remained present, a silent witness to her confession, honoring the trust she had placed in him. By the time the fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the desert floor, something unspoken had passed between them. It was a connection that went beyond words, a recognition of shared humanity, a quiet acknowledgement that even in a world filled with hardship and loneliness, small moments of honesty and courage could create profound bonds. And so, the evening ended not with grand gestures or dramatic revelations, but with the quiet knowledge that the woman's words had been heard, and that her truth, spoken simply and sincerely, had found a space in another heart. It was the beginning of something subtle, something fragile, but real. A bond formed in the desert twilight, in the shared stillness of two souls who understood, in their own ways, the meaning of vulnerability, respect, and quiet courage. The woman went to sleep that night with a feeling she had never experienced before, a lightness in her chest, a quiet warmth that came from knowing that for the first time, someone had truly listened. And the cowboy, sleeping under the stars on the edge of town, carried with him a sense of responsibility, admiration, and a recognition that human connection could appear in the most unexpected ways, even in the vast, silent desert. This night would remain with them both, a gentle turning point in their lives, shaping how they viewed each other, themselves, and the possibility that even the smallest gestures of honesty and courage could change everything. After that quiet evening by the fire, life in the small desert settlement slowly returned to its normal rhythm. The sun rose early, casting a golden glow over the adobe homes and rocky hills. The Apache woman continued her daily routines, tending to her garden, caring for her few animals, and helping her family with chores. But now, there was a new awareness in her mind. She found herself thinking about the cowboy more often, about his calm presence, the way he listened, and the respect he showed not only to her, but to everyone around him. The cowboy, too, could not stop thinking about the woman. He had traveled across many towns and settlements, met countless people, and yet, something about her stayed in his mind. It was not merely her beauty, which was quiet and understated, but her strength, her courage, and the honesty with which she lived her life. He admired the way she moved through her world, careful, steady, and yet never shrinking from challenges. There was a dignity about her that was rare, something that commanded respect without demanding it. As the days passed, the two of them spent more time together. At first, it was simple things: carrying water, repairing fences, and tending to the animals. The work itself was physically demanding, but it gave them a reason to be near each other without forcing conversation. They would speak only when necessary, yet each word carried meaning. The woman learned to trust his intentions, seeing that he treated everyone fairly and did not take advantage of anyone. The cowboy, in turn, began to understand the depth of her character, realizing that her quiet demeanor was not shyness, but a careful observation of the world around her. They shared stories occasionally, though always cautiously. She spoke about her childhood in the desert, the lessons her parents had taught her, and the hardships she had endured. She told him about the old ways of her people, about ceremonies and traditions that had slowly been lost to time. He listened, genuinely interested, asking questions not out of curiosity alone, but out of a desire to understand. He shared some of his own experiences too: the long days on the open range, the challenges of being a stranger in new towns, and the loneliness that sometimes came with his travels. Their stories were different in many ways, yet they found common ground in their shared understanding of resilience and independence. The woman began to notice small things about the cowboy that made her feel at ease. He never raised his voice, never spoke harshly to anyone, and never dismissed her opinions. When she spoke, he listened fully, sometimes nodding, sometimes asking gentle questions, but never interrupting or judging. In his presence, she felt safe in a way she had rarely experienced before. It was not the kind of safety that comes from walls or protection. It was the safety of being seen and understood, of knowing that her thoughts and feelings mattered. For his part, the cowboy noticed her quiet strength and intelligence. He saw how she could handle difficult tasks with patience, how she could navigate challenges without complaint, and how her presence seemed to bring a calmness to those around her. He admired her resilience, but he also sensed a deeper vulnerability beneath the surface, a part of her that had not yet been touched by kindness or affection. The memory of her words, "No one ever kissed me," echoed in his mind. Not as a challenge, but as a reminder of the humanity that connected them. One afternoon, as they worked side by side to repair a broken fence on the outskirts of the settlement, a moment of quiet connection occurred. They were both sweaty and tired, their hands raw from the work, but neither complained. The woman paused to wipe the sweat from her brow, and the cowboy glanced at her with a look that was neither teasing nor flirtatious, but something warmer, something that communicated respect and care. She noticed it, and felt a small flutter in her chest, though she quickly turned her attention back to the fence. They continued working, their movements synchronized without needing words. The cowboy passed her tools when needed, adjusted his position so she could work comfortably, and offered small tips when he saw she might benefit from them. She, in turn, followed his advice, appreciating the knowledge he shared without feeling patronized. The quiet teamwork brought a sense of partnership, a sense that they could rely on each other not just for the work, but for understanding and support. Evenings became their moments of reflection. After the day's work was done, they would sit near a small fire, much like the night when she had first shared her confession. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they sat in silence, but the presence of the other became a comfort. The woman found herself sharing more of her thoughts, not just about her past but about her dreams for the future. She spoke about the small joys she had always cherished: sunsets over the desert, the smell of rain on dry earth, the quiet moments when no one else was watching. The cowboy listened, responding occasionally with his own reflections on similar simple pleasures, and each exchange strengthened the bond between them. As the days turned into weeks, their connection grew deeper. Though it remained unspoken in many ways, the woman realized that she was beginning to care for the cowboy, not just for his presence, but for the way he made her feel respected, valued, and understood. She felt emotions she had never allowed herself to experience fully, a gentle warmth in her heart that was both comforting and new. She also recognized that she was cautious, aware that the world could be harsh and that attachment often brought pain. Yet, the connection felt genuine, and she allowed herself to trust it slowly, step by step. The cowboy, too, found himself thinking about her constantly. He appreciated her independence, her courage, and her honesty, but he also felt a desire to protect her, not in a controlling way, but in a way that came from admiration and care. He began to notice the small things: the way she laughed softly, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke of something she loved, and the quiet determination that guided her actions. He felt a growing sense of responsibility, a wish to be someone she could rely on, and to honor the trust she had placed in him by sharing her truth. Their bond was strengthened by shared experiences, both small and significant. They worked together in the heat of the day, shared meals, and occasionally helped others in the community. Always side by side. Each act of cooperation, each small gesture, each moment of mutual understanding reinforced their connection. They were learning each other's rhythms, preferences, and habits, forming a silent understanding that went beyond words. In a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving, they had found a sense of stability and trust in each other. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the distant hills, painting the sky in brilliant hues of red and gold, the woman and the cowboy walked to a nearby hill to watch the sunset. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried significance. A shared moment of peace, reflection, and quiet companionship. They spoke little, letting the beauty of the moment speak for itself. The woman felt a gentle calm settle over her, a feeling she had never experienced so fully before. The cowboy sensed the same tranquility, appreciating the stillness, the company, and the unspoken understanding between them. During that walk, the woman realized that her perception of love and affection was beginning to change. It was not just about romantic gestures or physical closeness. It was about respect, care, trust, and understanding. It was about having someone who truly saw her for who she was, who valued her thoughts, her feelings, and her presence. For the first time, she felt that such a connection was possible. That vulnerability could be met with kindness rather than judgment, and that human connection could bridge even the deepest gaps of loneliness. The cowboy, too, felt the shift in his heart. He recognized that his admiration and respect for her had grown into something deeper, something that went beyond friendship. He was careful not to rush it, not to impose his feelings, but he knew that their bond was special, rare, and meaningful. He wanted to honor her trust, to continue building a connection that was genuine, respectful, and enduring, no matter what the future held. As the weeks passed, the desert settlement continued its quiet rhythm, with the woman and the cowboy growing closer in ways both subtle and profound. Their connection was not loud or dramatic. It was built in small moments, shared glances, quiet conversations, and mutual respect. It was the kind of bond that could withstand challenges, that could be relied upon without words, and that carried the weight of honesty, courage, and care. In the safety of each other's presence, the Apache woman began to open her heart slowly, trusting the cowboy in ways she had never trusted anyone before. She allowed herself to imagine a life where her feelings mattered, where small gestures of affection were possible, and where human connection could be a source of comfort rather than pain. And the cowboy, in turn, allowed himself to hope that he could be someone worthy of that trust, someone who could honor her spirit while sharing his own. By the time the moon rose high over the desert, casting a silver light on the adobe homes and rocky hills, Both of them felt a quiet sense of contentment. The bond they had formed was still fragile, still tentative, but it was real and meaningful. It was a connection born from respect, understanding, and shared experience. A connection that neither time nor distance could easily erase. In the weeks that followed, the cowboy and the Apache woman continued to work side by side, sharing moments of quiet laughter, stories, and small acts of kindness. Each day brought new opportunities to strengthen their bond, to understand each other more deeply, and to appreciate the rare gift of genuine human connection. Though the world around them remained harsh and unpredictable, they had found something enduring, a quiet companionship built on trust, respect, and the simple, profound understanding of each other's hearts. The days in the desert settlement passed slowly, each blending into the next with the steady rhythm of work, sun, and quiet reflection. The Apache woman and the cowboy continued to spend time together, their bond growing stronger in ways neither of them fully expected. What had begun as simple companionship, helping each other with chores, repairing fences, tending animals, had developed into something deeper, a quiet understanding that went beyond words. They were becoming more than friends, though neither had yet spoken it aloud, and each day brought subtle moments that reminded them of the growing connection between them. One late afternoon, as the sun hovered low over the horizon, the woman sat on a rock near the edge of a small clearing, her hands resting on her lap. The desert was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of the wind through the sparse shrubs and the distant call of a bird returning to its nest. The cowboy approached slowly, holding a small bundle of firewood. He paused when he saw her, sensing the weight of thought in her posture, the way her eyes seemed lost in the distance. For a moment, he said nothing, letting her space remain undisturbed, knowing that some moments required silence rather than speech. She turned her gaze toward him, noticing his presence but not immediately speaking. She felt the strange mixture of anticipation and hesitation that had begun to accompany her thoughts of him in recent weeks. It was not fear, exactly. Nor was it nervousness. It was something softer, more delicate. A feeling of vulnerability that she had not allowed herself to experience fully before. She had spent so long guarding her heart, keeping it wrapped tightly against the uncertainties of life, that even the simplest gestures of care felt unfamiliar, yet strangely comforting. The cowboy sat down beside her quietly, placing the bundle of firewood gently on the ground. He glanced at her, his eyes soft, his expression calm. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he let the stillness hang between them, understanding intuitively that the moments of silence often carried more meaning than words ever could. The woman, sensing his patience and respect, felt a quiet warmth spread through her chest. She realized that she could trust him not to rush her, not to demand her feelings, but simply to be present, to witness her emotions without judgment. Finally, after a long pause, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I never thought someone would see me like this, she said, her eyes tracing the lines of the distant hills. Not just notice me, but understand me. Not just my work or my strength, but me. Her words faltered slightly, as if each one carried the weight of years of unspoken longing. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, feeling the quiet tremor of vulnerability that came with speaking so openly. The cowboy nodded slowly, his gaze steady, and he placed a hand lightly on the small of her back, not in a way that demanded anything, but in a gesture of reassurance. I see you, he said simply. I see who you are, and it matters. His words were gentle, truthful, and deliberate. They did not rush her heart, nor did they seek to claim it. They were an acknowledgement of her worth, a recognition of the person she had always been, even when the world had failed to notice. For a moment, the woman closed her eyes, letting the warmth of his hand and the sincerity of his words sink in. She felt a quiet release, as if a small part of her burden had lifted. The loneliness that had been her constant companion felt a little less heavy. The longing for connection, for understanding, for a simple gesture of affection, no longer felt impossible. And yet, even with this newfound comfort, there was a tension. A hesitation. A question that lingered in the air between them. How far could this connection go, and what would it mean if it grew into something more? The cowboy remained still, sensing the subtle shift in her energy, the delicate balance between vulnerability and self-protection. He understood that this moment was fragile, a crossroads where the past and future could meet. He had seen her strength, her independence, and her careful way of guarding her heart, and he knew that any gesture he made had to be thoughtful, respectful, and sincere. He did not want to rush her, nor did he want to risk the trust she had placed in him. Instead, he chose patience, allowing the moment to unfold naturally. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the desert floor, the woman turned slightly to face him. Her eyes, deep and expressive, held a mixture of hope, fear, and quiet longing. She did not speak, but her gaze conveyed everything she could not put into words. The cowboy met her eyes, feeling the weight of her unspoken emotions, and he realized that this was the moment he had been waiting for, not to take, but to give. Not to satisfy a desire, but to honor a trust, to offer a gesture that would acknowledge her humanity, her courage, and her capacity for love. Slowly, carefully, he leaned closer. His movements deliberate and unhurried. He lowered himself so that their faces were near, his eyes never leaving hers. The woman's breath caught slightly, a mixture of anticipation and nervousness, as if she were stepping into a new world that she had long imagined, but never dared enter. And then, gently, he pressed his lips to hers in a brief, sincere kiss, a kiss that spoke not of passion, but of care, respect, and the quiet affirmation of her worth. The moment was delicate, almost sacred, like the soft glow of the moon on the desert at night. It carried no promises, no expectations, no rush toward a future that might be uncertain. It was simply an acknowledgement of the human need for connection, the small yet profound power of tenderness, and the courage it takes to allow oneself to be seen. For the woman, it was a revelation, a realization that she could be loved, appreciated, and valued not for what she did or how she appeared, but simply for who she was. For the cowboy, it was a reminder that the simplest gestures could leave the deepest impressions, that respect and understanding were the truest forms of connection. They parted slightly, neither speaking immediately. The silence was not awkward. It was filled with the quiet understanding that something important had just occurred. The woman's eyes glistened, a mix of tears and wonder, as she processed the significance of the moment. The cowboy gave her a small, reassuring smile, one that conveyed both warmth and respect. No words were needed. The connection between them had been solidified by trust, courage, and the willingness to be vulnerable. As the sky darkened and stars began to appear, they remained seated side by side, their hands brushing occasionally, their hearts beating in quiet harmony. The desert around them seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging the importance of this moment in the lives of two people who had found each other against the odds. The wind carried a soft, gentle whisper, and the air seemed lighter, infused with the quiet magic of understanding, respect, and human connection. Over the next few days, their relationship settled into a new rhythm. There was no rush, no dramatic declarations, only the subtle, unspoken acknowledgement that something had changed. The woman felt a new sense of confidence and warmth within herself, a knowledge that she was worthy of care and affection. She moved through her daily tasks with a lighter heart, carrying the memory of the cowboy's gesture as a source of quiet joy. The cowboy, too, felt a sense of fulfillment. He had acted not out of desire alone, but out of genuine care and respect, offering a gesture that would remain with them both long after the moment had passed. He continued his work in the settlement, helping where needed, but always with a renewed awareness of the bond he shared with the woman. Every glance, every small conversation, and every shared task carried an added layer of meaning, a subtle acknowledgement of the connection that had been strengthened by that simple, profound kiss. They began to trust each other more deeply, sharing stories and experiences they had not spoken of before. The woman spoke of her dreams, small hopes, and even fears she had never voiced. The cowboy, in turn, shared his reflections on life, his past struggles, and the lessons he had learned from years on the open range. Each revelation was met with understanding, never judgment. And each moment reinforced the foundation of trust and respect that had grown between them. By the time the moon reached its peak, casting silver light over the desert, both felt a quiet contentment. The kiss had been more than a gesture, it had been a bridge between two worlds, two hearts, and two lives, shaped by different experiences but connected by shared humanity. It had created a space for vulnerability, care, and understanding, a moment that would linger in their memories and shape the way they related to each other in the days to come. The Apache woman went to sleep that night with a heart lighter than it had been in years. She felt a new sense of hope, a gentle warmth that spread through her chest, and the comforting knowledge that she had been seen, understood, and valued. The cowboy, lying under the stars not far from her home, carried with him a sense of fulfillment and humility, aware of the rare gift they had shared, a moment of connection that transcended words, actions, and expectations. Though the desert remained vast, quiet, and unchanging, the lives of these two people had shifted in a small but profound way. They had experienced a moment of human tenderness that bridged loneliness, fear, and uncertainty. It was a reminder that even the smallest gestures spoke in truth, a listening ear, a gentle kiss could have a lasting impact, creating bonds that carried meaning far beyond the moment itself. And so, life continued in the settlement, shaped by routines, work, and the desert's steady rhythm. Yet, beneath the surface, a quiet, enduring connection thrived. It was a bond built on trust, respect, and shared humanity, a bond that would guide them through the days ahead, reminding them that even in a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving, moments of tenderness, courage, and understanding could illuminate the heart like the stars shining over the desert night. Life in the desert settlement continued, moving with its slow, steady rhythm. The sun rose and set over the dusty hills. The wind whispered through the sparse shrubs, and the people went about their daily routines. Yet, for the Apache woman and the cowboy, things had changed in ways that were subtle but profound. The bond they had formed, the quiet connection, the trust, and the small but meaningful gestures of care had left a mark on both their hearts. They had shared something rare and tender, and it continued to shape their thoughts, actions, and feelings. The Apache woman began to notice how her perspective on life had shifted. She no longer carried the same weight of loneliness and doubt that had once been constant companions. She moved through her days with a quiet confidence, aware of her worth and the value of her heart. The simple act of being seen, truly seen, had unlocked a part of her that had been guarded for years. She smiled more freely, laughed more often, and found herself appreciating small moments, the warmth of the sun on her face, the sound of wind through the desert, the satisfaction of completing her daily chores. Each act, each moment, felt a little brighter, a little more meaningful. Her interactions with the people around her also changed. Family and neighbors began to notice a softness in her demeanor, a gentle warmth that had not been there before. She was still strong, still independent, but there was now a lightness to her presence. She was more open to conversations, more willing to share her thoughts, and more able to accept kindness from others. The memory of the cowboy's gentle kiss lingered in her mind, not as a longing for romance alone, but as a symbol of the possibility of human connection, respect, and understanding. The cowboy, meanwhile, continued his work in the settlement, helping where needed, fixing fences, tending animals, and assisting with other tasks that required skill and patience. Yet, his mind often returned to the Apache woman, to the moment they had shared, and to the subtle changes he had noticed in her demeanor. He admired her strength, her courage, and the way she carried herself, but he also recognized the vulnerability she had shown, and it made him careful, respectful, and thoughtful in every interaction. He understood that their bond was precious, built on trust and sincerity, and he wanted to honor it in every way he could. They continued to spend time together, though now there was a quiet understanding between them that did not require constant conversation. They could share a look, a smile, or a gentle touch, and it was enough to communicate feelings that words could never fully capture. This kind of silent companionship became a cornerstone of their relationship. In a world where life was often harsh and unpredictable, these small gestures carried enormous significance. Each act of consideration, each shared task, and each moment of quiet presence strengthened the invisible thread that connected them. As weeks turned into months, the Apache woman began to reflect on the journey that had brought her to this point. She thought about her childhood, the lessons her parents had taught her, and the hardships she had endured. She realized how much of her life had been shaped by survival, resilience, and self-reliance, and how little of it had included gentle affection, understanding, or emotional connection. Yet, in the cowboy, she had found a person who offered all of these things, not through grand gestures, but through consistent, quiet respect and care. The realization filled her with gratitude and a sense of peace she had never known before. The cowboy, too, considered the impact of their connection. He had traveled across many lands, met countless people, and faced numerous challenges, but rarely had he encountered someone who affected him so deeply. He recognized that their bond was more than friendship. It was a meeting of hearts, a recognition of mutual respect, and an acknowledgement of each other's humanity. It had taught him the value of patience, the importance of listening, and the quiet power of tenderness. He knew that the moment they had shared the kiss, the honesty, the vulnerability would remain with him for the rest of his life, shaping the way he viewed connection, trust, and care. Life did not suddenly become easy. The desert remained hot and unforgiving, the work demanding, and the challenges persistent. But the woman and the cowboy approached these difficulties with a new perspective. They supported each other, not through dramatic acts or heroic feats, but through steady presence, small gestures, and mutual respect. When the woman faced a difficult task, the cowboy was there to offer guidance or help without taking control. When the cowboy encountered obstacles, the woman offered advice, encouragement, and quiet reassurance. Together, they navigated life's challenges, each finding strength in the other's presence. The community also began to notice the subtle change in their relationship. Neighbors and friends saw the way they treated each other with respect, patience, and understanding. There were no public displays, no boastful declarations, only the quiet acknowledgement of care that shone through in their actions. This quiet bond became an example for others, a reminder that human connection could be powerful, transformative, and meaningful, even without grand gestures or dramatic events. Over time, the Apache woman began to allow herself to dream in ways she had not before. She imagined a life where she could experience kindness, affection, and mutual respect on a regular basis. She allowed herself to hope that such a life was possible, even in a world that often seemed indifferent or harsh. The cowboy's presence had shown her that trust could be built slowly, and that vulnerability, when met with care, could become a source of strength rather than fear. The cowboy, too, began to imagine a future shaped by this connection. He did not know what lay ahead, whether he would stay in the settlement or continue his travels, but he understood that the bond he shared with the Apache woman was unique and precious. He wanted to protect it, nurture it, and honor it in every way possible. He recognized that their relationship was not about ownership or possession, but about mutual respect, understanding, and care. It was a lesson in humility, patience, and the quiet power of human connection. As seasons changed, the desert transformed subtly. The sun continued its arc across the sky. The nights grew cooler, and occasional rains brought new life to the parched land. The woman and the cowboy continued their routines, their bond deepening in ways that were natural, steady, and enduring. They shared moments of laughter, stories, work, and quiet reflection, each experience reinforcing the trust and respect that had formed the foundation of their connection. One evening, as the desert sky was painted with the soft colors of sunset, the woman looked at the cowboy and smiled. It was a smile that conveyed gratitude, trust, and a deep sense of peace. The cowboy returned the smile, understanding its meaning fully. There was no need for words. The bond they shared spoke louder than anything they could say. In that moment, They both understood that their connection was lasting, built on a foundation stronger than circumstance, distance, or time. Even as the cowboy eventually prepared to continue his travels, the bond they had formed remained unbroken. The woman felt a sense of strength and confidence she had never known before, a reminder that she was seen, valued, and worthy of care. The cowboy carried with him the memory of their connection, knowing that even brief encounters, when built on trust, respect, and understanding, could leave a lasting impact. The desert, vast and quiet, continued to witness the lives of those who lived there. But for the Apache woman and the cowboy, it had become a place of transformation, growth, and the quiet celebration of human connection. They had experienced moments of vulnerability, honesty, and care that shaped their hearts, leaving an indelible mark on their lives. They had discovered that even in a world filled with hardship, small acts of kindness and understanding could illuminate the soul and create bonds that endure long after the moment has passed. In the end, life went on. The settlement continued its routines, the sun rose and set, and the desert remained a place of beauty, challenge, and quiet resilience. But for those two hearts, something profound had been created, a connection born of patience, respect, and the courage to be vulnerable. It was a reminder that human connection, no matter how small or quiet, could leave a lasting impression, changing lives in ways that could not always be measured but could always be felt. The Apache woman walked through her days with renewed purpose, her heart lighter, her spirit stronger, and her mind open to the possibilities of kindness and care. The cowboy carried the memory of their bond with him, a source of quiet inspiration, reflection, and respect for the human heart. And though their paths might diverge, the impact of their connection remained a gentle, enduring testament to the power of honesty, trust, and the quiet beauty of shared humanity. In this way, the story of two people so different in background, experience, and journey became a quiet legend of the desert. It was not a tale of dramatic heroics or grand adventures, but of the small, profound moments that shape lives. A listening ear, a shared task, a kind gesture, and the courage to show one's heart. It was a story that would linger in memory, reminding them both, and anyone who heard it, that the most powerful bonds are built on respect, understanding, and the willingness to be seen.